What if I told you that the most expensive thing you own has no price tag on it? Not your car, not your apartment, not your retirement fund. The most expensive thing you own is the next 5 minutes of your focus. And right now, 17 different companies are competing to take it from you for free. That's not a metaphor. That's the business model. And if you don't understand how it works, it is working on you. Every single day, every single session, every single time you pick up your phone because you felt a vague sense of restlessness and needed something to fill it. Here's what nobody in the personal finance space wants to admit out loud. The single biggest threat to your financial future in the next decade is not inflation, not a stock market crash, not rising interest rates, not even a recession. It's the systematic dismantling of your ability to think carefully about money. One notification, one autoplay video, one algorithmically perfect piece of content at a time. The attention economy is not a background phenomenon you can afford to ignore. It is the water you are swimming in, and most people are drowning in it while checking their phone to see if anyone liked their last post. That's not a criticism. That's a description of a system that is working exactly as designed. Let's define the playing field, because this conversation only makes sense if we're both clear on what we're actually talking about. Every single time you open an app that doesn't charge you money, you are participating in a transaction. You just don't see the invoice. The currency isn't dollars, it's minutes, it's cognitive bandwidth. It's the mental space between stimulus and response that used to be called thinking. Social media platforms, news aggregators, video services, even financial apps, they are all built on the same fundamental equation. More of your attention equals more advertiser revenue, equals more investment into capturing even more of your attention. The system feeds itself, and it uses you as fuel. It is extraordinarily good at this. It employs some of the most talented engineers, psychologists, and behavioral scientists on the planet to make sure of it. Consider this number. The average person now spends approximately 7 hours per day looking at screens. 7 hours. That is more time than most people sleep. More time than most people spend at work. And unlike sleep, which restores cognitive function, and unlike work, which typically has defined goals and measurable outputs, screen consumption engineered by attention maximizing algorithms has no natural stopping point built into it. It is designed to continue indefinitely. The only things that end a session are exhaustion, an external obligation pulling you away, or the faint and increasingly rare memory that you were supposed to be doing something else entirely. If that sounds uncomfortably familiar, good. That recognition is the beginning of something useful. Here's another number while we're at it. The top 5 social media and technology platforms by market capitalization are collectively worth more than the GDP of every country on Earth except the United States and China. These are not small companies running on hope. They are the most efficiently profitable businesses in human history. And the raw material powering all of that profit is not code, not servers, not intellectual property. It is the hours of human attention those platforms capture and resell. Your hours, my hours. The hours of about 5 billion people who log in every single day without fully understanding that they are the commodity being sold, not the customer being served. Now here is where this stops being an abstract cultural conversation and starts costing you real, specific, measurable money. The first way the attention economy drains your finances is through something researchers call the aspiration expenditure loop, and it is one of the most elegantly destructive mechanisms in modern consumer psychology. Here's how it works in practice. You open any major social platform, doesn't matter which one. The mechanics are functionally identical across all of them. Within 60 seconds, the algorithm has assessed your engagement history and begun serving you content from people whose lives look like a slightly upgraded version of yours. Not so upgraded that it feels impossibly out of reach. Just upgraded enough to create a low-grade, persistent background hum of the feeling that what you currently have is not quite enough, that your apartment is almost right, that your wardrobe is close but not there, that your car, your kitchen, your vacation, your body, your relationship status, all of it is in a permanent state of almost. This is not accidental. This is not a side effect. It is the result of thousands of hours of optimization research aimed at producing exactly that emotional state, because that emotional state makes you maximally receptive to advertising. A person who is genuinely content with what they have is, from the perspective of the consumer economy, nearly useless. A person who carries a quiet, chronic, low-level sense of inadequacy is a marketer's most valuable asset. The entire architecture of social media is built to keep you in that second category. And here's the part that makes it so effective. It works below the threshold of conscious awareness. You don't finish a scrolling session thinking, I feel inadequate, and therefore I will now go spend money to compensate. You finish it feeling vaguely restless, mildly dissatisfied, faintly hollow, and oddly convinced that acquiring something, anything, would make that feeling go away. Behavioral economists at MIT and the University of Chicago have documented this pattern with uncomfortable precision. The correlation between passive social media consumption and unplanned, unbudgeted retail spending is not subtle or theoretical. It is consistent, statistically robust, and financially significant. One analysis estimated that the average social media user in a high-income country makes between 4 and 7 unplanned purchases per month that they can, directly or indirectly, trace back to platform-driven content exposure. 4 to 7 every month. That's a conservative estimate. Run that math across 5 years, factor in the compound cost of capital not invested, and you are looking at a number that belongs in a conversation about retirement planning, not lifestyle spending. But let's say you're disciplined. Let's say you budget carefully. You track your expenses. You don't get pulled into lifestyle inflation. You know your numbers. Solid. The attention economy has a second door it will use to reach you. And this one is more insidious because it specifically targets people who believe they are being financially responsible by staying informed. The second mechanism is the corruption of investment decision quality. And this one is sophisticated enough that even people who pride themselves on financial literacy regularly fall for it. Financial content is one of the highest value categories on the internet, full stop. Personal finance videos, stock market commentary, crypto analysis, real estate investing content. This material generates enormous advertising revenue precisely because the audience is self-selected for being people with money to allocate, which creates an incentive structure that is almost perfectly designed to harm you. The creator who tells you to invest consistently in low-cost index funds, ignore short-term market movements, and wait patiently for 30 years will get respectable viewership. The creator who tells you the entire financial system is about to collapse, that one obscure asset class is the only thing that will protect you, or that there's a specific stock about to make a historic move, will get 10 times the views, 10 times the shares, and 10 times the revenue. Patient, boring, evidence-based financial advice is a terrible product in an engagement-driven media economy. Outrage, urgency, and fear are excellent products. The algorithm doesn't know or care about the difference. It optimizes for what keeps people watching. And what keeps people watching has almost no overlap with what actually builds wealth. The documented consequences of this are extensive and ongoing. The early 2021 retail trading frenzy saw hundreds of thousands of ordinary investors make concentrated leveraged bets on fundamentally questionable assets based entirely on narratives that spread through social media with viral efficiency. The crypto markets of the same period saw hundreds of billions of dollars flow into assets whose valuations were driven almost entirely by social media momentum, influencer promotion, and algorithmically amplified fear of missing out. Emotions that are the native language of attention maximizing platforms and are categorically toxic to sound long-term financial decision making. These episodes are not aberrations. They are the predictable, recurring, structurally inevitable output of a media environment where financial content has been captured by engagement optimization. They will happen again. They are probably happening right now in some corner of the financial internet you haven't checked today. And the people least equipped to recognize them are the ones who believe they are paying close attention. Ask yourself this, and be honest with your answer. The last genuinely significant financial decision you made, an investment, a major purchase, a change in your savings allocation. How much of the information that shaped that decision came from sources you sought out deliberately with a specific question in mind versus content you encountered while your brain was in passive consumption mode? If the ratio is closer to the second category than the first, you already know what that means. Here is the third impact. It is the one that appears on no balance sheet and shows up in no financial statement, but it may be the most consequential of the three. The attention economy is not just extracting your money through spending and investment behavior. It is gradually dismantling the cognitive infrastructure you need to protect yourself from it. Sustained attention, the specific cognitive capacity to focus deeply on a single complex problem for an extended, uninterrupted period, is not a fixed trait. It is a trainable and, crucially, a degradable skill. Cognitive neuroscience has spent the better part of 2 decades documenting what happens to brains that spend significant time engaging with algorithmically curated, high stimulation, rapidly switching digital content. The consistent finding across dozens of studies is that this pattern of consumption measurably degrades the capacity for deep focus, reduces working memory performance, weakens impulse control, and impairs the ability to maintain long-term goals in mind while navigating short-term pressures. One study from the University of Texas at Austin found that the mere presence of a smartphone within visual range, switched off, face down, not generating any notifications, measurably reduced available cognitive capacity because part of the brain was continuously consuming resources managing the impulse to check it. The researchers named this the brain drain effect. It is real, it is quantifiable, and it scales with how dependent you are on your device. Think about what this means in financial terms. The mental operations required to build serious wealth are almost universally the kind that demand precisely what the attention economy is eroding. Reading and understanding a financial prospectus requires hours of focused reading. Evaluating whether a business model is genuinely durable requires the ability to hold multiple competing variables in working memory simultaneously while thinking through second and third order implications. Resisting the impulse to sell investments during a market correction requires the ability to hold a long-term framework firmly in mind under conditions of significant emotional pressure, and act from that framework rather than from the fear response that is screaming at you to do something. Each of these capacities weakens with disuse. Each of them is under direct, continuous assault from systems that need you distracted, reactive, and emotionally activated to generate their revenue. The degradation is slow. It is easy to rationalize, and it compounds over time in exactly the way that unrealized investment returns compound, invisibly, until the gap between where you are and where you could have been becomes impossible to ignore. You are not being distracted from your financial goals as an incidental side effect of technology you happen to use. You are being systematically prevented from developing the cognitive capacities that financial independence requires by systems with enormous resources, massive scale, and explicit optimization targets that are directly opposed to your long-term economic interests. That reframe matters, because the response to an accident is different from the response to a designed system working exactly as intended. So what actually changes things? The first move is not a digital detox, a screen time limit, or a 30-day challenge. Those are responses scaled to a lifestyle inconvenience. What you are dealing with is not a lifestyle inconvenience. It is a structural economic extraction system. The appropriate response is structural. It begins with reclassifying your attention from a passive resource that flows wherever the current takes it, to an active asset that you allocate deliberately toward defined outcomes. This is not a motivational reframe. It is a practical operational shift. Your attention is finite. It is non-renewable. Once a day is spent, it does not return. The organizations that want it are treating it with more strategic seriousness than most people treat their own investment portfolios. You should at minimum match that seriousness. In practical terms, before any significant block of time, define what cognitive work that time is for. Not vaguely, specifically. Not I'll look into my finances, but I'm going to read the last 2 quarters of earnings reports for the 3 companies I'm considering adding to my portfolio. Give your attention a destination before you open anything. An undirected browser is a platform's best friend. A directed one is nearly immune to the standard mechanisms of engagement capture. The second intervention is source selection, based on incentive structure rather than content quality alone. The filter is simple, and it applies to everything. How does this person or organization make money from my engagement with this content? If the answer involves advertising revenue, affiliate commissions, or any form of payment that scales with your continued consumption, then their financial incentive is not your financial outcome. It is your continued attention. That doesn't automatically make their content wrong or useless, but it means you are responsible for discounting it appropriately. The same way you would discount investment advice from someone who earns a commission on every trade you execute based on their recommendations. Use engagement optimized financial media for entertainment and background orientation. Build actual financial decisions on information from sources whose incentive structure is structurally aligned with your success rather than your screen time. The third intervention is the one that feels least like finance and matters most. Protect and deliberately cultivate cognitive space for original thinking about your own situation. The gap between a notification and reaching for your phone. The commute where you habitually put in earbuds. The 10 minutes before sleep when you scroll instead of think. These are not wasted moments. They are the moments in which your brain, given the chance and enough practice, will produce its most valuable original thinking about your actual life and your actual financial situation. The best financial insight you will ever have about your own circumstances will not arrive while you are consuming someone else's content. It will arrive in silence, or near silence, in a moment you protected from the constant offer of something more immediately stimulating. The attention economy cannot monetize your original thoughts, which is precisely why it works so hard to prevent you from having them. To bring this into focus, the attention economy is a real, functioning, extraordinarily well-resourced market in which your cognitive attention is the primary commodity being traded without your informed consent. The extraction happens through three compounding channels: engineered spending impulses driven by aspirational content exposure, systematically distorted investment decisions driven by engagement-optimized financial media, and the progressive erosion of the deep thinking capacity that wealth building fundamentally requires. None of this is theoretical. All of it is documented, ongoing, and scaling with every new feature, every new platform, every new optimization cycle. And none of it will stop because the incentives that drive it are among the most powerful in the global economy. What changes is your relationship to the system. You cannot opt out entirely, and you do not need to. You need to become the kind of user the system is not optimized for. Deliberate, goal-directed, incentive-aware, and fiercely protective of the cognitive space where your actual financial thinking happens. That user is not a monk or a technophobe. That user is someone who understands what is actually being traded every time they open an app, and has decided to start negotiating from a position of knowledge rather than surrendering by default. Reclaim the attention. Audit who receives it and why. Build deliberate systems around your financial thinking, rather than leaving it exposed to whatever the algorithm decides to serve you today. And remember that in an economy where your focus is the scarcest and most aggressively pursued resource on the market, simply deciding where your attention goes, and meaning it, is one of the most powerful financial moves available to you. If this shifted how you think about your own consumption habits, share it with someone in your life who is serious about their finances but hasn't connected this particular set of dots yet. Subscribe if you want content that treats financial literacy as something that runs deeper than stock picks and savings rates. And I want to hear from you directly. When you look at your actual screen behavior this week, not the version you describe to someone, but the real version, which platform do you think has cost you the most money? Not in subscription fees, but in the quality of decisions it shaped, or the thinking it quietly replaced? Put it in the comments. I read all of them.